Okay, starting with 7. So recall from the previous section that when we have an expression such as x squared plus 7, and they ask us to substitute or evaluate, that all we need to do is place the value or substitute the value with parentheses everywhere we see a positioning or a place that we can make that substitution. Then once you've made that substitution, like I just did, substituting 3 in for everywhere, only one position for x, then from there we just simply use our order of operations to finish the job. 3 squared is 9, plus 7 is 16, and that's it. Any questions about that? So basically it's the same stuff that we did before, with the only difference being that maybe we're now having some exponents and various other operations that we need to complete. Number 8. Now, one of the things I talked about and really emphasized in the previous section and opened this section up with in the previous problem is that when we substitute, we will always use parentheses. And that's very important in this problem because if you fail to use parentheses properly, you are going to probably get this question wrong. Now, look at this right here. Notice how I substitute with parentheses, and what I do is I literally replace the variable itself, not the sign in front of it, just the variable with a set of parentheses and whatever value we're supposed to be substituting or evaluating for. So you want to be very careful that in this problem you don't make this mistake, because this is not the same thing, is it? This is certainly not the same. Do not make that mistake. Make sure when you substitute, you only replace the exact variable. If there happens to be a sign in front of it, leave the sign in front of it, but not included with it. And why is that important? Because this becomes a positive 16, but then the minus sign comes down, and that makes all the difference, doesn't it? If it was negative 4 squared, it would be positive 16, and that would be wrong. And then we, of course, can finish the problem, and that's going to be a negative 10. Okay, any questions about that at all? Anybody want me to do yours? Make sure you get your question right. That is a really important skill. And the last thing we want to do is make mistakes with simple substitution. All right, let's keep rolling. All right, so in this problem, we have 2 places that we can substitute or evaluate for or with. And so we have a negative 15 in the first position and then another one. Now, if you recall the previous section, we didn't have very many negatives that we were working with. And you can immediately see in this section, there are a lot of negatives. And where there are negatives, mixes of signs, there are opportunities to make mistakes. And so you want to be very careful that you are watching and aware of all the possible mistakes you can make when you're working with negatives. Okay? So with that said, negative 15 squared, if you don't know what that is, go do the math on the side. 25, 75, 0, 5, 1, and that's going to be 225. So I've got a negative to an even power. Negative 15 times a negative 15 is going to be a positive 225. And then from there, I can go do the other one. 15 times 7, that's going to be what? 105. So positive 105. Now, like I said a moment ago, is that anytime you're dealing with negatives, there is a very high probability that you can make a mistake. So paying attention to your signs is key. A negative squared is going to be a positive. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive. And of course, always paying attention to your multiplication that you're doing, your times tables. I'm going to erase this. And so then, just simply adding them, that's going to be what? 330 as my answer. Are there any questions about your number 9? Anybody want me to do your number 9? You didn't get it right, something not quite working, let me know. I'll be happy to do your problem. We okay? Ready to move forward? Stop me, slow me down if you're not. Just raise your hand. Okay, let's go to the next one. So here we go, x squared plus 3x minus 5. And I am evaluating this expression when x is 3. So again, no matter what, I am in that habit of substituting with parentheses. Anytime I see a set of parentheses, I substitute with parentheses. Now from here, it's just order of operations. 3 squared is 9. 3 times 3 also is 9 minus 5. And then of course we just work left to right. 9 plus 9 is 18 minus 5. 18 minus 5 is 13. Done. All right, go make sure you can get your number 10 correct. Let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to help you. Any questions? Things I can help you with? I'm going to move on to 11 unless you want to slow me down. I'm happy to do yours. All right, let's look at another one. Very similar, just different numbers and values to substitute or evaluate for. And so I've got a negative 6 now. What is the first important thing that you do? Substitute properly. Now, it doesn't take a lot of skill to substitute properly. It really doesn't. All you have to do is make sure you put parentheses up. Set up the parentheses, put the correct value in, and then from there, do your order of operations. So let's take a look here. I have substituted properly. What's my first one? Negative 6 squared, which is going to be a positive 36, times that 3. Then a negative 5 times a negative 6 is going to be a positive 30, minus that 2, which nothing happened with. So take a moment, make sure. Negative 6 times negative 6 is a positive 36. Now you notice I left that in parentheses because I want to ensure that I see that this is multiplication and I don't make any mistakes. Now this one, a negative 5 times a negative 6, I was very careful with my signs. 2 negatives multiplied together make it positive. And I know my times tables. 5 times 6 is 30 minus the 2. All right, now we can then work on this. 30 times 36, that's going to be, I think, 108. And of course, if you took your time to do that off to the side, you would get that too. Now, I'm simply going to work left to right. 108 plus 30, there's my first one, left to right. 138, then minus 2. And then my last one, 138 minus 2 is 136. Done. Now, go make sure you can get yours right. Really make sure yours is correct. We don't want to keep chugging on if you aren't understanding it. I'm happy to do your problem. You just let me know. And if you're doing great, fantastic. Any questions? We doing okay? Getting the right answers? Okay. Okay, things get a little bit more complicated and complex. Let's take a look at this one. Now, as we talked about in the last section, it's so important that you write the problems down correctly. So after you write it down, make sure you double check your work. It doesn't take long to double check your work. It's maybe 5-10 seconds of extra time just to make sure that you're not starting incorrectly, you're starting with the correct pieces. And then from there, notice how in this problem we have 2 things to substitute. So here we go with our substitution. Make sure you substitute correctly and with parentheses. Substitute correctly and with parentheses. So for me, my x value is going to be a -3. My y value is a -1. -3, -3, -1, -1. Now, if you notice here, I made sure that I included this sign because I'm not replacing this sign with that -3. A lot of people would put down that -3 and easily leave this sign off. Just like over here in this problem, we had a negative in front of it and we substituted 4. And so the negative sign didn't go off there. We have a negative sign here. Our x value is -3. That still doesn't change the fact that that's a negative sign there. So pay close attention to it and substitute properly. All right, let's get going with the actual work. -3 squared is going to be a +9, which then becomes negative. All right. Then over here, we've got a -1 to the 3rd power. Any negative to an odd power is going to stay negative. So 1 times 1 times 1 is just 1. -1 to the 3rd power is -1. I'm not going to go and do that multiplication just yet. I'm going to leave everything alone. Now, at this point, I want to say to you that there's a lot of people that would probably do various things in different orders. But what am I doing? I'm following the order of operations. And order of operations say that we need to do the exponents first. And that is exactly what I did in that first step. Exponents first. Once you've done your exponents, then you can do any multiplication or division. No multiplication. Multiplication. -2 times -3 is a +6, which will in a moment multiply by that -1. Here's another multiplication, +2 times -1, which is going to be a -2. But I still have a little bit of multiplication left, which is right here, +6 times -1, which is going to be a -6. What saves me is that I always write down all of the signs as I move along. -9, -6, -2. And now, in these two steps, I've now taken care of all of the multiplication in that problem. Now this, I would certainly say that this is a difficult problem. There's a lot of stuff going on and lots of places where you can make a mistake. Now, look at what's going on. This is just subtraction to subtraction. -9 minus 6, -15 minus 2. And one more subtraction to finish off the problem. -15 minus 2 is -17. We're done. Okay? Now, if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to help you. This is a tricky problem. Very easy to make a mistake in multiple places. And so if you have questions about that problem, troubleshooting it, we can do it together and see if we can get the right answer for you. Any questions? Okay, I'm hoping that the silence is you guys doing great on this. Okay, all right, let's go to the next one. Okay, let's look at this one. So it says, we've got a formula, and it says Celsius is 5/9, whatever your Fahrenheit temperature is, minus 32. Essentially what they've given you is a conversion. This is the formula to convert a temperature measured or expressed in Fahrenheit to Celsius. And that's the formula. Let's take a look. So use the formula to convert 5 degrees Fahrenheit to its equivalent temperature in Celsius. So when they say that, they're really just asking you to do all the stuff that we just did, but in the context of temperature. So if they gave you C equals 5/9, F minus times the quantity, F minus 32, in any of these previous problems, and then they said F equals 5. Well, all you would do is substitute 5 for F, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So 5/9, 5 minus 32. Now, you could substitute it with parentheses. That would be fine. Whatever you'd like to do there. But as long as you make sure that the 5 goes in for the F, the Fahrenheit temperature. Okay? Then from there, we can go do the math. 5 minus 32 is a negative 27. Now, I hope that you recall a little bit of the fraction work we've done before. This can be a little bit tricky, and so I want you to see this real quick. I'm going to rewrite this as negative 27. Let me rewrite that so there's no confusion. Negative 27 over 1. Why do I write it as negative 27 over 1? So that I can do what? Cross diagonal simplification. Do 5 and 1 have anything to cancel? Nope. How about 9 and 27? Yes. They're both divisible by 9. 9 divided by 9 is 1. 27 divided by 9 is 3. And so, let's rewrite this problem. That's going to be 5 over 1 times negative 3 over 1. And so, the Celsius equivalent is negative 15 over 1, or just negative 15. Some of you might never have written this down. Now, why is this problem tough? Well, because there's a little bit of fraction work thrown into this. Fraction multiplication thrown in with substitution. But the reality is that we have done this before, and there are several steps that you could have probably eliminated from what I did. I just like to write every single step out so there's no confusion as to what we did. So, first, what's the theme? If you're given some expression, you can substitute with it. Once you do that, go through your procedure of solving it. If for some reason fractions come up, then deal with them the way that we've learned how to deal with them. Just like this, cross, cancellation, simplification, reduction, and then finish it out. So this isn't really anything you haven't seen before, but of course, with most students, doing fractions is not as smooth as the other basic operations when there's not a fraction. Did you guys get the right answer? Anybody want me to do theirs? Happy to work your problem. You guys all right? Good? Okay. All right. So I'm going to skip this one because for us, it's not really that critical that you know all the properties. It's not make or break for this particular class. Let's move on to this next one. 8x plus 5x. Didn't we do this last class? This should be a quick review. So 8x plus 5x is 13x. Done. No big deal. Okay. Let's do another one. And so just recall that the previous section, we did this stuff. And maybe you're not super smooth with it yet, but hopefully more practice is going to drive you into that mastery place. Recall that this is the distributive property here. We can multiply 2 times 5x when we open the parentheses to make 10x. 2 times positive 2, positive 4. Does the 2 multiply by the negative 3? No, because that negative 3 is not in those parentheses, so that negative 3 just gets brought down. And recall, we did that in our last section. We just went over that. So hopefully it's relatively fresh in your minds. And now, how do we finish this? Combine like terms. Positive 4 and negative 3 come together. So that's 10x plus 1. Everything is combined. We're done there. Not too bad. Certainly much easier than some of this stuff right here. And again, a review of what we did in the previous couple sections. All right, another review. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come over here to do this. Probably can squeeze it in over there, but I'm just not going to bother. Now, we did a problem just like this in the previous section. So what it is we've got a double distributive property to handle. And then we're going to need to combine like terms and identify which things go together. 6 times 2y is 12y's. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. 2 times 3y is a positive 6y. And 2 times 2 is a positive 4. Now, as you can see here, I've just completed the double distributive property, this one and the second one for doubles. And now what I can simply do is combine like terms. Let's put the y terms together. 12y's plus 6y's are 18y's. Negative 24 plus 4 would be a negative 20. So that's it. That's all there is to it. And everything is combined. I have only one y term, only a single constant term, not multiples of them throughout the problem. That's it. Any questions about your number 17? Something not working, something I can clarify, something we can do together? You just let me know. Anything? Questions? Okay, let's go to 18. All right, a little bit more complicated one because we're dealing with more negatives here, but I don't think it's anything that you guys aren't capable of doing with a little bit of thought. Now, I do think that this is the first time that we've seen negatives in our distribution. The last section we came from did not have any negatives. And so this right here actually is the piece that is the learning component in this specific problem. I don't think we've done this before, so if you aren't familiar when there's a negative sign in front, pay close attention. Let's go distribute. Here we go. 2 times negative 3x squared, positive 2 times negative 3 is going to be a negative 6x squared. Then, that 2 needs to distribute to the positive 2x, which is going to make a positive 4x. Let's go to the next one. Now, I have a negative times a positive 3x. So I'm going to pause right here to warn you. If you don't know how to deal with this, follow along. If you do, great. If you're already ahead of me, that's fantastic. So I've got a negative times a positive. That's going to make it a negative 3x. Okay. Now I have a negative times a negative 3x squared. So this negative is getting distributed to this one. A negative times a negative is a positive 3x squared. So I basically use my rules for positives and negatives multiplying to determine this. Now, last class, somebody asked the question, or we talked about it, what number can we think of this like? Like a negative 1. So this is like a 2, a positive 2 being multiplied. This is like a negative 1 being multiplied to these items. And so if this was negative 1 times 3, you would say it's negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 3, you would say it's positive 3. So it's not, again, it's not anything you haven't seen before, but because it's in a little bit different context, it could throw you off. Okay, let's go combine like terms. So let's put the negative x squared terms together. This is another area that could throw students. X squared, they're just x squared terms. They don't become x to the fourth, they don't become anything else, they are just x squared terms. So negative 6x squared plus 3x squared is negative 3x squared. Why? Because negative 6 plus 3 would be negative 3, and they are x squared terms, so they remain x squared terms. Let's go do the other ones. Positive 4x minus 3x is going to lead to just a positive 1x, or just x, and that's all there's to that problem. This is not easy, so this is a tricky problem. There's certainly areas that you can make mistakes in it, but hopefully you paid close attention, and if you do have a question, please raise your hand, ask me, I'll be happy to do your problem for you. Any questions at all? You doing okay? All right, let's roll on to the next one. You can skip number 19. 20, we don't need these for now. We should do 21. Oops. All right, so we've done something like this before. Let's go work this one. Recall that when we're doing order of operations, we work from the inside out. So the very first thing you should do is address 2 times x, which is 2x, 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4, and then since this plus 1 is not in here, just like we saw in this problem, it does not get that 2. It just remains plus 1. And so what I've now done in my first step is worked from the inside out to open up those parentheses. Now, let's keep working from the inside out and combine like terms where applicable. Negative 4 plus 1 is what we need to combine. You could have underlined them, whatever works for you, so long as you would get negative 3 here. Any questions about that? And now, what does this look like? This looks like any of these, any of these, any of these, any of these, and over there, you just simply need to distribute. 5 times 2x, 10x. 5 times negative 3, negative 15, and that's all there is to it. Okay? Make sense? Let me know if you have questions. I'll be happy to do your problem right here and help you get through yours. Anything I can help you with. Anything. Yes?
I'll through my steps. I had 3, and then I had the bracket.
3 or 30?
3.
3, okay.
And then 3, and then inside of parentheses would be x minus 2.
Okay.
Close parentheses plus 1.
Okay. Let's roll through it. What happened first for you?
I multiplied the 3 to the x and the 2.
Okay, what do you get from there?
3x minus 2.
There's your mistake. You multiplied 3 by the,
Oh my God.
you got it? Okay, well let's just finish it. So what do you get? What's the correction here?
Minus 6.
You got it, and that affects everything, of course, right? So from there, let's go through it. Let's just go ahead and finish it. What would happen next?
You subtract the, it would be negative 6 plus 1.
You got it. What do you get?
Negative 5.
Very good.
And then bring down 3x.
You got it, and then bring this down. Keep going. Let's close it down.
Multiply 3 times 3x.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 times negative.
Okay. What do you get?
Negative 15.
Over here. And what do you get up here?
9x.
You got it, and there's your answer. And just a small, and I'm really glad you made that mistake. So I'm going to come over here just to illustrate that error. We oftentimes will draw the lines, but sometimes forget to actually do the operation. So if I say 2 times 5x, I better get a 10x. If I do 2 times 2, I better get a 4. And that applies to any of these where we have to distribute. A lot of students will make the mistake of distributing or just even forgetting to distribute, and you miss those other terms in there. Easy to make that mistake. Anybody else? Yes?
So it's a 2 for the bracket, and then 5, and then parentheses is x minus 6 plus 1.
Okay. All right. What do we do first?
Multiply the 5 by the x.
Good. What do you get?
5x.
Good. What else?
Multiply the 5 by negative 6.
Okay. What do you get?
Negative 30.
Good. And then what's the rest that should be on that line?
Plus 1.
Okay. Anything else on that line?
And then inside the brackets.
Good. And anything else out here?
2.
Good. All right. What's next after that?
You multiply negative 30 times positive 1.
Ooh, multiply.
You add.
Yes. Okay. Because this is addition here. If it was multiplication, maybe the 1 would be in parentheses right next to it, but that's addition. What do you get from negative 30 plus 1?
Negative 29.
Good, nicely done. Read to me the rest of it.
So it's 2 outside the bracket, 5x, and then negative 29.
And then
Or bracket.
you got it. Okay, close it down for us.
So then you multiply 2 by 5x equals 10x.
Good.
Then 2 by negative 29, and that equals positive 58.
Positive 58.
Oh,
What should it be?
negative.
There you go. Good. Signs, right? So times tables, signs, little mistakes. It's all very common. Very, very common for students to make those mistakes. What you want to do is practice enough where you minimize that happening. Know what your weaknesses might be and control for that. Good job. Any other people with questions? Okay, good. Number 22. Same concept in 22, but we do need to address it because it is the second time in this section that we see a negative right in front of a set of parentheses. So recall that the first time we saw it was in this problem right here. It was the first time we saw a negative directly out in front of, or directly in front of a set of parentheses. So this problem is very similar to the 3 prior ones, with the extra added piece, the added piece of a negative being in front of parentheses. So let's go address it very similarly to what we did before. We would need to open up these parentheses inside. A negative times a positive is going to be a negative y. A negative times a positive is going to be a negative 2. So you need to be very careful about how you work your signs. If this was a negative here, it'd become positive. So be aware and understand that this is multiplication essentially, and you've got that negative is like a negative 1 being multiplied by the terms inside of there. So let's go ahead and bring everything down like we did in the 3 previous problems, and let's go clean things up. So from here, 5 and negative 2, 5 and negative 2 need to combine. 5 minus 2 is 3 minus y. So be very careful with that. Combine like terms. 5 minus 2 is 3. And then now we need to distribute. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times negative y is negative 5y. I'm sure they'll take this, or alternatively, negative 5y plus 15. Okay. Any questions at all? Okay. And I'm going to leave 23 for you guys to do all by yourself, and I'm going to do the big one in 24. And that's going to be my last one. Let's see if we can tackle this 24. Step 1, make sure you write everything down correctly. So easy to make mistakes if your details are off right from the beginning. It doesn't hurt to take your time to really verify and ensure that your starting point is correct. If that starting point is off, you miss a sign, a number, whatever it happens to be, then all of your work, well, you know, it's good to practice, might be for nothing. So I'm going to look at my problem and make sure I have the correct things to start with. I'm writing it down correctly from the start. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's get going. So the very first step, you can do a couple things. You can actually do multiple things at the same time. Technically, this is the only thing you should work on right from the beginning. But because this is completely separate from this, you could probably do all of your distributions at the same time. So you could treat it like it's a problem with double distributions and knock those out from the very beginning. So let's do that. Positive 4 times positive 5 is a positive 20x squared. Positive 4 times negative 4 is a negative 16. So I've just distributed and opened up those parentheses like I've done in, say, these problems and these, everything. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is leave this minus sign alone, and then I'm going to multiply. 6 times 2, positive 6 times positive 2 is a positive 12x squared. Then a positive 6 times a negative 1 is a negative 6 plus 4. All right, now I can't really do anything here. I need to go and clean things up inside of these brackets as my next step. So I'm going to put those together. Negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. And then I'll leave everything else alone because that's all that I could do to get started. Notice, everything comes down that did not get worked on. This was the only thing, and I don't miss a single detail. I get every little detail right. I take my time. There's no sense in rushing through this if you're going to have to go do it again because you move too quickly. All right? Any questions at all about this step? Anything? Okay. Now, what happens next? We need to open up this. But note, there's a negative sign, like we have over here, and like we have over here. 3 times we've seen this scenario occur in this section, and I hope by now you guys are starting to get familiar with how to work things when there's a negative right in front. So what happens? These stay the same, don't touch them. A negative times a positive is going to be a negative 12x squared. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive 2. And that is where I said you got to be careful. Look at what happened here, same concept. Negative times a positive, negative. Negative times a negative, positive. However, over here, everything was positive, so they both became negative. You guys with me? Okay? And then this was negative times a positive is negative, and negative times a negative is a positive. Consistent across the board. And now, close it down. And actually, that right there is just like this. It's very much like this problem, combined like terms. 20x squared, negative 12x squared is going to be 8x squared. Negative 16, positive 2 is negative 14, and I'm done. Make sense? Questions about that at all? Hopefully you got yours right. If you did, that's a big success because this is actually quite difficult. And if you can do this, a very complete problem. It tests all of the skills that we worked on from the start of this section. Aside from evaluating. Probably the little extra thing would be like, well, if x is such and such, substitute it. Okay. We okay? Any questions at all? Anything?